Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Moxtober Daily Recap for Day 23, Howl. For those of you who don't know, Moxtober is a special event during the month of October where every day there is a prompt and people do creative work with that prompt related to Magic the Gathering. Most folks do custom Magic card designs, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. For those of you who think my voice sounds a little bit different, that's because I am subbing in for Kayo today. I'm Mark Confidant, and with me today is Juliet of the Beacon of Creation podcast and Ancestral of MTG.design. With that said, let's just hop right into it. The card I'm going to start with is in the MSE set, and it is Curious Howler or Curious Pet / Gleeful Howler. So what I like about this card is it's a really, really solid top-down capturing of the idea of a gremlin. Obviously, they didn't have getting it wet makes it multiply or anything, but I don't think mechanically that works the most easily. And having just one of the gremlin concepts implemented is probably the most achievable. And just the idea of feeding a thing after midnight working this perfectly is really enjoyable for me. I do think it's a little bit difficult to successfully jump through the hoop here as far as things go, and the payoff is not super impressive in my mind. So I might try and figure out a way to push it a little bit on the back end or give you some sort of reward for the actual process of jumping through the hoop. But other than that, I like this card quite a fair bit.
This card scares me, but gremlins in general scare me a lot. So I do like that the backside is all your creatures are food. That's a fun little thing. 2 sacrifice another creature, you gain 3 life is a fun little way of doing that. The wet thing, I imagine you could add a line on the front, if this is ever blue, transform it. But that's a really weird, silly thing because lace effects are not very fun to play outside of Painter's Servant, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It reminds me a little bit of the Tavern Innkeeper because it creates a food token. It's a 1/1. It's 2 mana. I actually think that maybe it's a mistake being able to transform it. Well, I don't know. It seems kind of, it doesn't have Nightbound. So I think that's what's confusing here because I guess we're just so used to the night-day mechanic with Daybound and Nightbound. And I guess theoretically that those two don't have to be related. I don't know if this would be better off if it just said Nightbound, but, or Daybound or whatever. But yeah, I agree with you, Juliet. The kind of turning your other creatures into food, that's kind of fun. But I do think maybe it's a missed opportunity that it's a beast and not a gremlin.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great point.
One thing I just noticed that's, I think, kind of important is this has Death Touch on the night side. And I hadn't thought about that specifically in the context of transforming it at instant speed. Because this doesn't have any sort of restriction on when you can transform it other than that it has to be night. And that's leaning on one of the weaknesses of double-faced cards, which is the reminder text for what it turns into is super bare bones. So your opponent isn't going to know that this is Death Touch on the backside unless they've experienced it before. And that's kind of gotcha. In the realm of instant speed flashbacks in the graveyard style gotcha.
Yeah, you're right. This would be a really nasty combat trick. Block with my Curious Pet. Hey, nothing can go wrong. And I'll transform it. Wait, what? Yeah, so instant speed Death Touch is super powerful. But so if it was sorcery speed, that would be one thing. Or if it transformed Day, obviously that would be a little bit different. But then again, a 3/3 Death Touch, you're paying 2 mana for a 3/3 that's with some extra conditions. I think that's fine. So I don't think it's I think that the overall cost seems fine. But yeah, I agree with you that the Death Touch thing.
Yeah, yep. Let's move on to our next card.
Do you want to start, by the way, Julia?
Sure. So in the MSE file, let's look at Howl You Escape by MBTree. That's a contraction. Howl, how will you escape? And this is a fun, it's a simple blue common. We love simple commons I guess this is the podcast, on the show. And I really like the pun here. I think this is a really fun idea to do in the house space and in that kind of AFR ability sort of space.
I feel like the flavor words here are really spicy. I'm not sure that the rate on this card is a thing that would end up seeing play. Maybe it's supposed to be cantripped and have a smaller shrink. Because I feel or maybe it's just supposed to be 2 mana cantripped, because Twiddle is allowed to be like a cantrip spell at a certain rate, and so is whatever variation on like shrinking a guy you do. I feel like this card doesn't justify its existence like on a pure rate level as a game piece, but I like all of the pieces other than like the rate.
Yeah, I mean, all the flavors really there. I really love the artwork, and it's got this lock with like it's like this face with the long tongue, and meanwhile they're looking down at presumably the rogue that's trying to find the right key. Or maybe that's the guard. Maybe that's the guard that's trying to let the hero in. But yeah, in any case, you're right though. I mean, tap or untap target artifact. I mean, even Twiddle, it wasn't literally permanent, but it artifact, creature, or land. And this is just an artifact, so it seems very narrow. Maybe this would mostly be a sideboard card, but at least you got the two different modes. Maybe in the right deck, that shrink ability is kind of nice. Yeah.
Sadly, I don't know that choose one or both works very well with the flavor words. Although, if you're doing Lady Blackbird or things like that, you do both pick a lock and trick a guard in order to get out.
Bonus points, though, for the creative use of Howl.
Here's an interesting question. What would a third mode on this be?
Well, keeping in mono blue, because like the flavor words are also mono blue in spirit. So it's not like, burst of strength, break down the walls or anything like that. Find a secret passage, like can't be blocked except by creatures with the defender type of one shot effect.
Yeah. Or like I'm not sure blue gets cheap enough flicker for this to work, but just teleport out, exile target creature you control.
Totally.
Do a phase out thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that works too. Like ghost form out or something where you just target creature phases out.
Misty Step? Is that one?
That sounds right. I honestly haven't brushed up enough on D&D recently to recall.
Let's move on to the next card.
Before I forget, though, all credit on this one to MBTree, and last one was done by Elry. Ancestral, what's your first card?
So I'm going to go with Conclave Wolf. So this is 1 green white. This is on mtg.design. It is a wolf for 3/3. It's a 3/3 wolf. It has Wolf Call. So that is a custom keyword ability. When this creature enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a wolf permanent card with higher mana value. Put it in your hand if you do shuffle. So this, I don't know. It's possible that the wolf call might be just a tad strong. However, obviously you can't find any 2 or 3 mana wolves with it. The body seems fine. I like the idea that the wolf can call other wolves, so the flavor seems spot on.
Is it mercenaries or rebels that scale upwards up the chain?
Rebels scale up, mercenaries scale down, which I only know because it came up on Cedric Phillips and Patrick Sullivan's podcast.
I don't mind, this kind of incentivizing individual tribes and kind of doing fun little payoffs, because occasionally that can make them fringe constructed playable sometimes, or make a very thematically focused commander deck actually come together in a playable way. I don't know all of the wolf permanents off the top of my head, because it's like, okay, a lot of the big flashy ones of recent years are werewolves, and it is kind of funny that they're like human werewolf, but they're not like werewolf wolf on the backside. Otherwise, I don't really know a lot of go-to wolves. I assume this isn't a set kind of like Spiritcraft. Like there's going to be a lot of wolf call or creature call. I'm not sure which.
Right, that's a good point. That could be kind of fun if there were I don't know, bird calls or something like that.
Bird call, wolf call, elf call.
Right. I don't think there are any wolf tribal permanents, so this would just basically get creatures, and I think that's totally fine. Like, at first I was like, gosh, you could just get like the 7 or 8 mana wolf that does crazy things, but green is all about big creatures. We have Fierce Empath, which is like a 3 mana 1/1 that gets a 6 or greater mana value creature. So I don't know, maybe this is absolutely fine. And obviously, if you have like 3 Conclave Wolves, they can't grab each other. I guess I do like the fact that maybe flavorfully, like when I think of Howl, I think of Howl from Beyond, and it's like it gets really large power, and so I don't know. This scales up when you go seek a card.
Mechanically,
you can
wolves
get
are. Oh, you go ahead.
You can get Chameleon Colossus with this, but like curving like Conclave Wolf, which tutors up my Chameleon Colossus, which I then immediately play, or my mist form creature. Anything? I don't think that's breaking any formats probably.
I was gonna say mechanically, I think it's like Howling Wolf or something like that is a wolf that gets itself. So there is this kind of concept of like wolves going and getting things, or at the very least, like howling being a mechanical way of going and getting things. I am kind of antsy about this as like if it were a set mechanic, a little bit of repetitive game state in terms of like you just find your 2-drop with Wolf Call into this with Wolf Call into your 4-drop with Wolf Claw or whatever. I think you have to like program in gaps and stuff. Or I do kind of like the idea, and this might be a terrible draft environment if it were the case, but having a bunch of creatures that have call for different creature types, and you have to like build a deck where you can like assembling the chain becomes this kind of fetch quest.
Like elves could call for wolves, and wolves could call for elk or something.
I was thinking more like Ikoria, where it's just like, okay, this can go get a nightmare, but the nightmare is also a cat, so that nightmare cat can go get a cat, and the other cat is actually a cat beast, and that can get a beast, and that'll get the beast dinosaur, and like
yeah, that's another way to
do
it.
Your way up the chain.
That would be interesting though if there was like a wolf like mutate creature, so you could I don't know, call the wolf and then you could create a different creature which itself
Yeah, I feel like
the other thing to do for sorry, you go.
I feel like it's one of those things where in order to keep this from being like a thing that would be repetitive in a limited or constructed environment, you have to create like this kind of breakup of the synergy, or like the things that each thing is asking you to do have to be kind of wildly disparate. So you're like, well, I want to get this creature type, but in order to get that creature type and this creature type, because the 2-drop gets this and the 3-drop gets that, then I need to have like this random 5-drop that's not the best stats, but it bridges both of those creature types or something.
The other thing I think to do if you were doing this in like an actual limited format and not like a commander precon or something, would be to pull more from Cascade. Like it flips until you hit the next higher mana value permanent that fulfills some criteria, and that goes into your hand. So there's like you can get repetitive play, but you have to like work, and like you're working towards that repetitive play by like refining your deck rather than like stumbling into repetitive play.
Yeah, it becomes Demonic Tutor only with a significant deck construction constraint. I do think that that's a good note just in general.
Let's move on to the next card.
All right, let me look in my notes. Let's do Howl's Moving Castle in the MSE file. It's a land that taps for colorless. You can pay 2 and tap it to search your library for a land card and exile it, then shuffle. And Howl's Moving Castle has all activated abilities of the most recent card exiled by it. I enjoy this in part just because I really like Miyazaki films, and it's a very good example of like capturing that from a top-down perspective. The idea of going and visiting places is really well captured here. And I also feel like the power level rate on this is not the most absurd. It doesn't get triggered abilities, so it can't do stuff like tutoring up your the zombie making land that everybody is angry at because it's frustrating. Field of the Dead. And the activated abilities that it can get, some of them are super strong, but it's still 2 mana to go and get it. And I think that often enough, it's going to be the case where you're using that 2 mana in order to treat this like one of those fetching lands from Alara block. The like
a panorama?
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to like panorama into turning this into a dual land. And admittedly, panoramaing into like a 2-color land is not a crazy rate, but it's like a cool thing to be able to do to have your ETB untapped land that can panorama into, I don't know, a triome or something.
I think being able to pick up like filter lands or reflecting pool could be something conceivable in, but you're also playing a colorless land in your potentially many colored deck. I like this both because the castle like moves, but there's also the cool thing in Howl's Moving Castle of each of the doors in the castle, or like the door in the castle can go to different places, like totally different places in the world through like weird like teleporty magic. And so the idea of like, okay, we're exiling it, we're setting the door to open up in, the city on the other side of the continent, and while it's connected to that, we can open the door and go to that place.
Yeah,
but
that's a
to
good
open
way
up the door to the other place would be different. Yeah.
That's a good way to capture the two. I think it works for either of those, and just like Howl's Moving Castle is kind of like a land that evokes mobility if you choose to capture it as a land card. I don't think that Reflecting Pool works though, because Reflecting Pool has a static ability that grants it its activated abilities, I think.
Oh, wild.
Yeah, this thing is like, it does some weirdly big brain things in terms of like, you can't get Urborg, you can't get like a bunch of stuff that would otherwise be kind of problematic.
Oh, that's very neat.
You can in EDH get Gaia's Cradle, which is a little bit scary.
This card is basically Thespian Stage, except Thespian Stage you can just copy any land. So in a way it's not as strong, but in a way maybe it's stronger because you could fetch an on-basic from your deck. Like if this was was a commander game, maybe you have 5 or 6 different really cool non-basics that do some crazy stuff. But the downside is that it's obviously like your land's already tapped. Maybe it's a way of like getting Maze's End like a little bit faster because it's basically fetching for a land card.
I was thinking that like Karoo or Lotus Field sort of thing. You can pick a Tron land of choice, but this of course won't have the types for the Tron land or a Locust sort of thing.
If
this
there's
is, of course. Mm-hmm.
Like a land that has a really punishing enters the battlefield effect, because you could ignore the ETB. Would be
really interesting here. Being able to just have a colorless untapped land that you can pay 2 mana to turn into a 2 mana land like Karoo's. That seems conceivable. I think this land that can also fetch for Caracas effectively would be another relevant. I guess Caracas or Maze of Ith.
Do you think this breaks Dark Depths?
No, this doesn't work at all with Dark Depths.
Thankfully.
That's why it's so much worse than Thespian Stage, I think, because this doesn't work with Dark Depth.
You would exile it and then
it just
because it's not called Dark Depths.
Well, it's because the triggered ability is tied to Dark Depths, but it only has the activated abilities. So you can remove one of the 0 ice counters on this.
Sure, I see.
I see. It's a clever way to word it as far as things go. I can tell that. Let's see, who designed this? Do I have the file?
This is by Anado Finstark. Also, the previous card was by Kaokun.
Oh, well, I see that this was made by Nim.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, that was the artist that I said. Yes, this is designed by Nim. Ignore what I said, except for that is the artist who did a nice job.
All right. I think we can, move on.
What if this was an artifact, is my last pitch. There's the classic idea that you can take any land and make an artifact that costs 2 generic mana. And I think an artifact with search your library for a land card and exile it, then shuffle. This has the activated abilities of the most recent card exiled with it. Could be a fun little artifact.
Yeah, at that point it becomes kind of like a mana rock that isn't an expedition map. I feel like this would probably have to be ETB. It'd probably have to be 3 mana, just because like 2 mana rocks already have like a pretty high premium to them. But then it can be like 3 mana for a mana rock that can upgrade into like copying your 3 mana land or your Karoo.
I might remove the generic mana ability and do 2 to cast and then 2 to summon up the first mana ability. So it's kind of like an Armillary Sphere that way.
Yeah, maybe even 1 and 2 if it's like fully trying to be map. Although at that point it's not costing you a land drop the way map is, so maybe it is 2 and 2 to be like Armillary Sphere. I could see haggling it either way.
Yeah. I think my card is next.
That sounds correct to me, yes.
So let's go 1 card above that in the MSC file. This is Howl with Me by... No!
Yeah.
No! Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I was so excited to talk about this card. Oh.
I'm sorry.
Curse you, artist's credit.
I mean, we could talk about it without the art, without showing the card. Leave that to you.
Let's see here.
Here's what I'll say in its absence. A cool silver border design would be a card that has you a woo, and if somebody else playing a silver bordered game near you within earshot, a woo's back, you both get to create some wolf tokens. I think that would be a really fun thing to try to design around, making that actually work.
I kind of wish it was each player though. Is like the one note that I'll make. Okay, so what
Yes.
other card would you like to do?
Let's look at Howling Owl, which is also in the MSC file. This one's by Garduu. It's a like howling mine magpie, like a 4-mana like bird that'll draw you some cards, but it's like a howling mine. It makes both players draw. And kind of the payoff there is that it's like flying in vigilance and potentially like group hug E.
Yeah, we had Howling Golem from Dominaria, which obviously was an homage to Howling Mine. And I think that was a 2/3 with the same kind of attacks blocks. This is actually pretty nice because you have vigilance. So it's you could potentially attack and block each turn, which is kind of cool until it dies.
One thing that my immediate thought seeing this is of the Great Designer Search 3 and whether or not this could be a entirely white card instead of a white-blue card.
Ooh. Only recently, right? Like, this is not a classically white card. This could also just now be a mono-blue card with the addition of vigilance into Blue's pie.
Yeah.
Is it a crime to have a wolf that's not red or green or black?
We've had some white wolves historically, right?
I guess like what, Thunder Wolf? Go way back.
I think it's been a while. Have most of them been errata to
We've had some
$100?
green-white stuff. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. The other thing that this is great with is another owl, which is of course Ebony Owl Netsuke. The classic artifact at the beginning at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. If that player has 7 or more cards in hand, Ebony Owl Netsuke deals 4 damage to them.
Yeah.
So this is an owl for your Howling Mine deck.
I do kind of love that it is that. I wonder if at rare you just put the Howling Mine text instead of flavor text on it.
I also like that. I mean, being a wolf bird, I think of owl bear, which I don't know if that's strictly an owl and a bear, but this I guess would be an owl wolf.
I was about to say this'll let you do the whole wolf Banjo-Kazooie thing, but that's not actually how that works. Yeah, just a fun kind of clean and straightforward card, but also not a card you would see every day because each player draws a card is this kind of weird sideways effect that not a lot of people want to play, I don't think.
It's weird that people kind of dislike that though. At least in theory, when you draw symmetrically, if it's your turn when it happens, you get the first chance to use it unless you play it exactly unless you do it on curve. Like if you play a 3-drop that cantrips both players, then you would get the second chance to use it. So it's not quite neutral against your favor then. But like when you have a Howling Mine effect on a creature and it happens on your turn that each player draws a card, that means that for each sorcery speed thing, you get the first crack at it.
Yeah, let's move on to the next card.
All right. Let's go with Izzy, Raised by Wolves. So this is in MSC. And 3 red, green, legendary creature human. When Izzy enters the battlefield, create 2 wolves. When a wolf dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when Izzy dies, each wolf you control deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I really like the flavor of being raised by wolves. The wolves make you stronger, right? Like it seems natural that probably a human's going, I don't know, probably going to outlast the wolf. So the wolves sort of, they're raising the human, getting bigger. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Arlen from Innistrad Midnight Hunt, where Arlen creates the 2 wolves right away. But Izzy's a little fragile right off the bat. Like you're spending 5 mana and you hope that you're able to raise Izzy into adulthood here. But I think it's really cute. I just like that flavor and mechanic so much.
If you told me that this was a Magic named printing of a secret layer for Princess Mononoke, I would believe you 100%.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
I do think the rate on this is a little on the softer side as far as things go. I don't know if that pumpkin set symbol is meant to be mythic. I feel like, because in the use case where both the wolves die, you've essentially gotten 2 2/2s for 5 mana and then a 2/3 after the other 2/2s have died. In the situation where Izzy dies first, you've gotten 2/2/2s and a ping. So I feel like you could probably push Izzy, or no, not a ping, like a shock, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I still
I
feel
think
like
the image. Yeah, go ahead.
I still feel like this could be like 4, probably.
The image shows a U, so I wonder if it's supposed to be an uncommon.
It's possible, yeah.
I agree. I think this could be at 4. I think it's okay to occasionally like do a softer cost on a legendary, but I don't play competitive EDH, so I might not be speaking to that community when I say that. Part of me kind of wishes that, like, obviously the card has enough lines of text already, but what if you named each of the wolf creature tokens and made them legendary? Like, I don't know. They'd probably have to be very short names, but Ma and Pa, I don't know.
I do like when they make those legendary wolves that just... it feels like that's mostly been Selesnya that's done that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Drizzt did it, and so did character who showed up in War of the Spark and also in original Ravnica, whose name I am forgetting.
Holmir Wolf Rider, maybe? Something like that, at least.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next card.
Let's see, what do I want to do? Let's go over to ntg.design and look at Bloodthirsty Lycan. It's 1 a black and a red for a werewolf with Undying, and excess damage Bloodthirsty Lycan would deal is dealt to you instead. I think that's a very interesting line of flavor text and a very good way to make a high power creature have some like kind of jackal pup punishment text on it. In that, like, oftentimes this will, the first time it comes around, get blocked by a 2/2. It'll deal 4 to your opponent's face, but it will deal its excess 2 to you. So you're getting 2 bodies, both of which have like pretty aggressive stat lines at the expense of 2 life and probably more life than that later. And it also makes it kind of a deceptively bad blocker, because your opponent can, especially when you're at low life totals, swing in with a 1/1 and be confident in knowing that Lycan can't block.
Also, this one is by designed by Wantaname or Wantaname. I'm not sure which. I like this as a drawback. I think playing in the excess damage creative space is a really nice mechanical space to play in. It's intuitive in a way that a lot of earlier iterations of trample and trample adjacent things were really, really not intuitive.
Yeah,
I think this, I mean, the Undying part is really nice, but I think this drawback's actually pretty significant. Being a 4/2, if your opponent has 1/1s or 2/2s, I mean, you're losing quite a bit of life. So for 3 mana on a rare, that seems pretty stiff. Like, I just don't, maybe there's an argument to be made for, I don't know, like black, red, like maybe that's a little bit much, but just it's so easy to want to chump this card unless you can give it trample. Even trample wouldn't help. Menace, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Menace would be interesting. I think this could be 1 black. This reminds me a lot of Arrogant Bloodlord, of the like this wants to scuffle with big boys. This does not want to get in the weeds against 1/1 or 0/1 tokens or anything.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting though, because like Undying is a really, really powerful mechanic. It's essentially natural 2-for-1ing. So you're trading life for a 2-for-1, which I think is perfectly acceptable in black. And I also think that like the Jackal Pup style of like you have a creature that deals damage to you, maybe it's less in red these days, but I still feel like it's at the very least acceptable in red. I could see this either as a hybrid mana card or a mono black card very much, but I don't think that the rate is bad so much as it is just a card that has like situational advantages versus very commonly run things like removal, and situational disadvantages against like a white weenie deck.
Yeah, I mean the Undying part's the only thing I don't know how to, like, it is strong. Like the fact that you can get it back. I just probably could push this a little bit more. Brackish Trudge, which is an uncommon from Strixhaven, that was a 4/2, that was 3 mana. It entered tapped, but you could get it back. And I mean, we have 4/2 commons for 3 mana, like Onake Ogre. So I don't know, Frenzied Raptor, like maybe maybe just a vanilla 4/2 in some cases is better than this card. But I do like the mechanic playground. Like I like the playground of using that excess damage.
I guess you could also push it by having it be excess damage. No, because I don't feel like a 4/2 trample is that safe. I was gonna say excess damage Bloodthirsty Lycan would deal is dealt to both players instead.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd put menace on this. Honestly, I think that would be great for a rare. Your opponent is forced to block with 2 creatures that might kill it, or rather, that might not result in too much excess damage if they double block. So I think I would put menace on this and be happy with that.
I see. I just think you aren't appreciating the rate of undying because, like,
Probably not.
any random, like, have you ever gotten swung in by like a Strangleroot Geist and you're like, well, I mean, I could block this, but even blocking it isn't really going to do anything. I'm just like letting them go from shocking me to bolting me every turn. Or I can like, if it gets outclassed on like its front half, it still has its like back half. And if they block with like a 2/2, you end up with this 5/3, and maybe they can't swing it in because you've got like a bunch of small creatures and it's going to hurt them too much. But they can just save it for like an Alpha Strike turn where like this will hit in with a bunch of other stuff if it is getting outclassed by a bunch of random things. But how many like 1 toughness creatures that can brawl with this is the average standard deck even playing?
I think this could be like an uncommon. Obviously, this is true of many cards that are rare. An uncommon in like a Modern Horizons sort of format where it's like, okay, yeah, we've got a black red. The intersection there, we've got a fun, weird sacrifice, aggro, life loss, Death Shadow style deck, and a +1/+1 counter theme. We want to put them together and have a tribal synergy with werewolves. Great, here's your card. Here's your fun, powerful uncommon, but in a set that has a pretty high power level already.
I think this thing is actually worse in limited than it is in constructed, deceptively.
Because there are more just chump creatures around?
Yeah, there's more just like random garbage that it can run into. The like constructed usually converges on very specific rates that creatures are at. And like the one thing that constructed converges on frequently that I think that this thing is horrible against is like 2/1s for 1. But other than that, it's not really bad against any other constructed creature that I would look at and be like, oh, I'm playing that 100%.
Let's move on to the next card. I don't know whose card it is.
Oh, it's you.
Okay, great. Let's look on the mtg.design file. A card named Howling Spirits. This one's designed by YellowPie. And it's a mono white hate bear. It's a flying 1/2 that, you know, taxes and inhibits some artifact sort of things. But I really like the idea of the thing you pull from Howling Mine not being the card draw part, but the like mono artifact era tap, it loses its abilities sort of thing that most artifacts had, or I believe at one point in time all artifacts had as part of being artifacts. If you go early enough in Magic, that when they are tapped, their abilities stop existing.
I really like this as a riff on Collector Oof, in part because it's like not always better than Collector Oof, in that like the body's worse, and I kind of wish you got rid of the activate abilities thing in order to make it so it wasn't just strictly better, or so it wasn't like its prison piece was strictly better than Collector Oof, because I think it is on that part of it. But like not being able to kill Constructs, for example, is a really powerful usage case of this.
They lose their power and toughness as soon as they attack.
Yep, and then they cease to be. Or if they have tapped ones already from attacking you before, those also. Mm-hmm.
This is a reference to Howling Mine because back in original Magic, artifacts, the way that they were written and designed is that artifacts, if they were tapped, at least I think it was continuous artifacts, when they were tapped, they would be basically offline. So that's why on the original text for Howling Mine, if it's tapped, I think that's still the case, right? If it's tapped, it doesn't draw cards. And the same with Winter Orb. So I think that's what this is referencing, being that it's got Howling in the name. Yeah. The interesting thing about this is the tapping. Players can't tap artifacts to cast spells or activate abilities. And I don't know if that's just to prevent, I don't know, like Icy Manipulator from tapping down someone else's artifact. I'm not sure what that the reason behind that is, but certainly it turns off mana rocks and any kind of formats where you have mana acceleration that's a little rough.
And improvise, is that right?
Oh,
Yeah.
this shuts off improvise. Oh yeah, sure does. And
Oh,
affinity.
I just
It shuts
realized
down affinity decks.
it doesn't entirely shut
Wait.
down affinity though. You
Or
still
maybe
have your
not.
equipment.
Yeah, you can't do like a
Hmm.
springleaf drum or some paradise mantles, but you can. I mean, sometimes paradise mantle will work, but realistically, in an affinity deck, are you putting your paradise mantle on a non-artifact creature? Probably not. Anyways, though, maybe an Emery, but like that's a weird use case scenario. I think affinity can get around this. But again, no constructs means Saga is going to be or no attacking constructs at least means sagas are going to be worse.
I changed my mind actually. I do think that this text is totally great as like a runner with Collector Oof, just because the equipment can still equip. That like balance note, that sort of like difference makes me actually just love this card. Shout out to YellowPie for this excellent design.
Let's move on to the next card.
All right. Well, since we're talking about tapping down artifacts and continuous artifacts, old school artifacts from Magic's history, let's talk about Howling Caves. This is on mtg.design. And 2-mana artifact at the beginning of each player's end step. If it's untapped, that player ventures into the dungeon. So kind of a neat little rift here. Instead of drawing cards, you get to venture into the dungeon. Obviously, a newer mechanic from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. The flavor is certainly there going into the caves. I really like the art on the card. And it's, I don't know, kind of interesting being able to grant other people the ability to venture into the dungeon. It's not something that we have, I think, seen cards do yet, but certainly some dungeons can take quite a while to venture into.
I like sitting down opposite this, either in traditional Magic or in like a multiplayer sort of thing, and being like, what dungeon do I want to venture into? I haven't thought about this with my deck because it's never come up before. I don't have any venture into dungeon cards in my deck, so I haven't considered what dungeons, what path, what the best procedure and payoff would be. There's also a great combo with How Will You Escape, where you can tap your own Howling Caves to deprive your opponent of the ability to venture into the dungeon once. That's totally worth a card, right?
Well, I mean, if it's 3 opponents, maybe.
Sure. Maybe.
Maybe. I also like that the symmetry is breakable just through doing more adventuring on your own than your opponents are. Because if you're going into, what is it, Dungeon of the Mad Mage or something like that? The one that lets you cast the top 3 without paying once you complete the dungeon, then you feel a lot better being able to speedrun the dungeon yourself, where your opponents are like, okay, well, I'll go to Mines of Phandelvar again, because they don't have any adventure stuff in their deck, so they're just going for like the okayest rate.
Yeah, I think this would be, and man, I think we have a missed opportunity here because I'm thinking, this would get really fun as we get more dungeons to venture into, and now I'm just realizing I really wish we had a dungeon card that we could talk about for Howl, but yeah, like if there were more dungeons to choose from and they had different kinds of payoffs, then suddenly Howling Caves becomes a lot more interesting. But I mean, we still have 3, so it's nothing to scoff at.
Do you think that adding additional dungeons is a form of errata-ing the dungeon cards, or is it just like changing what dungeons are available?
I don't think it's errata. I mean, I think it's not a whole lot different from like we're talking about like Maze's End having different gates.
Yeah, it's like, I guess they do constitute cards in and of themselves, although it's weird that they are cards because they don't occupy any space in your deck or your sideboard. But they are technically sort of cards. Like, they aren't actually tokens, weirdly.
I think not to just always talk about these extraneous products, but the place I would be looking to see new dungeons printed would be silver bordered, like top of the list silver bordered. After that would be things like, which would be weird to be like, here's a silver bordered dungeon. There's not actually venture into the dungeon as a main mechanic in this set, but this is for your fun to make your AFR decks a little bit wackier in casual play. Or in like a venture into the dungeon commander precon when they do stuff for, whatever D&D product 3 years from now, and they want to essentialize that sort of thing. I think it's inevitable that they'll print more, partly because it probably doesn't break anything. It doesn't break anything that enough people care about.
I would argue that probably venturing in the dungeon wasn't a well-loved mechanic, but I think the way to fix that is to make more interesting and exciting dungeons.
There's a difficult thing with dungeons where, like, it's very easy to just converge on one dungeon as being the best thing to be doing, which is kind of sad, because, like, AFR Limited was dominated by Mines of Phandelvar almost entirely, with, like, the edge case of if your opponent was really low, then you would go to Tomb of Horrors. But, like, adding another dungeon, it's possible it would be strictly better than some other dungeon, or it's possible it would be better in most use cases. And it's really hard because, although you could, I guess, specify venturing into a specific dungeon. Like, maybe you have, like, a dungeon that you can only venture into when a card earmarks it. I don't know. Something like that.
You have a card that says, create a dungeon with the following text.
And that's all the lines of it is explaining the dungeon.
You can't cast this card, but it now exists in your command zone as an accessible dungeon. That would be very silly. Right. Or, a card that says, whenever you would venture in the dungeon, instead, do this ability. It's more fun.
I would hope it would have it's more fun in reminder text. That would be extremely amusing.
Like a haunted house. Just like a really fun, casual haunted house thing. I think the next unset is, like Disney World themed, right? Or theme park themed. Yeah. You could have a weird thing that you venture into, but is like really, really recursive, but does technically work. Yeah. Should we move on to the next card?
Yeah. Speaking of Silver Border, the next card is from the mtg.design file, and it's College Fight Song, which, while black bordered, I really think should be silver bordered. It's a lesson for 4 mana. With creatures you control, get +2/+2 until end of turn. And if you have a college party, creatures you don't control lose Death Touch until end of turn. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, and Ward. Your college party consists of 2 monocolored creatures of enemy colors and a 2-colored creature that's exactly those 2 colors. I just really enjoyed this as being like, the idea of a college party is a clever riff on things, although I do think it should be silver bordered. And the idea that the lesson I'm learning is to go out to a party and, chant a song about the sports team with my buddies and then swing in to the opponent sports team is just amusing to me.
Ooh, so all right, so you need basically the houses in Strixhaven, right, were all enemy colored houses, right? All enemy colored houses. So essentially, if this were in Strixhaven, you would need 1 creature that is gold from that house, and then you'd want 2 creatures that are of each color. Yeah, it's kind of asking for a little bit here of a setup. The fact that it's a sorcery, I guess your opponent can see it coming. The +2/+2 is really nice for 4 mana. That's actually pretty decent, especially if it's generic mana. And removing stuff for things like First Strike, Double Strike. I guess just 4 mana +2/+2 is fine. I suppose you don't have to have the college party.
Yeah, I think in play I would only be paying attention to the first line, and like if I'm lucky on the second half, sure, but I would be mostly looking, hey, this is a +2/+2 that I can learn up, and that's a fine rate. It's a card I would say I would take even at like a rare in a draft if I had sufficient learn otherwise.
I also think that there was some thoughtfulness put into not putting flying or reach in the list of abilities removed. So it's not precluding your opponents from blocking. It's just making it so the creatures that they block with, if they have something that makes them impressive in a fight, that goes away.
It is certainly a way to get around Hexproof, which may or may not be a good thing, and Ward. So if your opponents did have Hexproof on some of their big creatures, you could cast this and then destroy them.
Shall we move on to the next card?
Yes, we shall. And by the way, because I forgot to mention, this will be the last card for each of y'all, or this will be what we're wrapping up on.
Oh, by the way, that last design is by WUBRGnich.
WUBRGnich.
Oh, right. So I'm actually gonna. Is it me?
Yep.
I think. Great. I'm gonna present the card that I designed for this day. It's in the MSC file. It's designed by Juliet. Its name is Wailing Widow. It's a 1 white black creature banshee hag. When Wailing Widow enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls a creature, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. This is of course in the white black kind of hag Gwillian themed deck that has, including this, at least 5 board wipe or wrath effects. If you include that kind of barter in blood as a wrath, which I think in a lot of limited states would be. And so the kind of question, how does this feel on rate? How does this feel when it's a creature? And this whole idea of this as the a creature wrath.
So one of the questions I have is like obviously the breaking state, or like the state that is like most conceivably busted on the card, is your opponent goes 2 drop, 3 drop, you drop this and 2 for 1 them. It's like quite strong at that rate, but like not overwhelming for an uncommon. And obviously you're like removing their worst 2 cards if they've managed to curve like 1, 2, 3, or if you do this on turn 4. So there is like definitely some constraint to it as far as things go. And then there's other like fair 1-for-1 modes. It becomes challenging when it gets to you actually sacrificing a creature, where it's like even on rate then, but like you have to have this thing where you design your deck around having adequate sacrifice fodder. So is there like token production in the same Jumpstart pack, or in like Jumpstart packs that you're likely to see?
So in this Jumpstart environment, there's 10 packs that you work with. There's quite a bit of manifest, and there's a little bit of token production on the side, but the most common thing you'll see is manifest, which is like token production. If your opponent has 2/2s or bigger, you can say, hey, I'll sacrifice my 2/2. I'm not flipping it anytime soon.
Yeah, we had Oh, okay. I was going to say we had Barter in Blood in one of the Jumpstart packs, which is literally just a 4 mana, 2 black, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So I suppose in a way this isn't too crazy, although it might be stronger because you can sacrifice the hag. Obviously, a 3/2 for 3 mana is still pretty decent, all in all. So, I mean, obviously you probably wouldn't want to sacrifice the Wailing Widow, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if maybe the sacrifice, it feels strong to me. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I don't know if it's just the fact that with hybrid mana it makes it a little bit easier to cast, but I mean, obviously like we've had this effect in black quite a bit, but I totally get the whole, we have wrath effects and such like that that are kind of in both white and black.
And of course, Juliet's strong theory of Jumpstart design is that because this will only ever exist in a Jumpstart pack that has both white and black mana sources, despite having hybrid in its cost, it's effectively a gold card. The other thing I would reiterate is, so there's 12 spells in this white-black Jumpstart pack. 5 of them are wraths. And whether or not that affects the like evaluation, where you're like, well, I really want this to be a 3/2. Sometimes it'll be removal, but I have all of this other removal that I'd like to use as removal because it can't also be a 3/2.
I think if I could create enough tokens, I'd be happy to just like as a newer player, right? Like I would be really happy to play this knowing that I don't have to sacrifice the Widow.
Sure.
I think this is a card that gets stronger the more token production you have. The on curve, like 3 mana, get rid of 2 of their things case is like the strongest case. And then like weakening the other case is not too bad a thing when that one is like pretty darn solid on rate. Just on the assumption that like sacrificing some manifest things and your opponent having like, and the manifest things showing up late enough in the game that realistically, by the time you can just throw out 2 manifest things, your opponent can have some trash to throw away as well. Leaves this at a reasonable balance point. I'm not sure about like how I would feel about a Jumpstart pack that has, by wraths you mean like Wrath of God effects, right?
Yeah. I mean, they don't all just say destroy all creatures. It's like destroy all tapped creatures. This is a sacrifice 2 creatures. There's a 6 mana just instant, which is just destroy all creatures. There's also a lot of like weird recursion abilities in this format. Not in the white black pack as much. The white black pack doesn't have a ton of manifestor token production, but a lot of the other packs do. So depending on what pack you get alongside your white black pack, you would go, okay, how am I going to play this time? Am I going to try to lean totally control? Am I going to try to go wide enough that I can, get this sort of creature out and value out my opponent? But the kind of question that I'm asking with this pack in particular, this kind of hyper experimental thing, is what's the marginal value of each additional wrath when you aren't constructing your deck, when you just have a 40 card deck?
Yeah, I think I probably need to see it in playtesting, but my initial intuition is that, like, as a game piece, if your opponents know that the deck is all wraths, then it becomes like a different sort of transaction. But like sight unseen, running into like Wrath of God, Wrath of God, Wrath of God, like obviously that's hyperbolic, but like destroy 3/4 of your creatures, destroy all your opponent's creatures, destroy like 2 creatures in a 2-for-1 chained together is likely to spiral out of the game in favor of the white-black player's favor.
As long as you can win the game somehow.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the other Jumpstart pack is for.
Yep. But yeah, shall we move on to the next card?
Yeah, Ancestral, what are we closing out with?
Okay, let's talk about Moon Branchers. This is in MTG.design. It is 2 green for a creature bird, although I'm just starting to realize bird without flying, but we'll ignore that for a moment. Whenever Moon Brancher deals combat damage to a player, you may howl. If you control 2 or more creatures with equal power that attacked this turn, you howl and create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. I don't know if you actually verbally have to howl, like howl, but you're howling, I guess, as an action in the game. And when you howl, you untap target land you control. So I think the howl effect here, that ability, is kind of interesting. You are incentivized to have equal power. It reminds me of a card from Strixhaven in the green-blue house. I think there were a couple of cards that liked having the even power and toughness, and most wolves are 2/2, so that works really nicely. And I like the idea that you can howl and get a wolf. So I think all of that is flavorly really cool. Maybe the flying part is the only flavor thing that gives me a question mark, but I'm willing to ignore that.
Yeah, of course it is also green, so then there's a question like, well, this might be a little much if it was a 2/3 flyer for 4. I do like that if you've somehow howled earlier on in the game, the 2/2 that you got previously can turn on howl alongside this card. So that's a fun thing for the kind of howl centric deck.
I do worry about like it continually happening though. Like you're just making a wolf for each like each. I guess it's just like it's a hoop though, where it's like, I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of steps to this process, but then when it does happen, it's kind of recurrent.
Do you think on all creatures with howl, it is when this deals combat damage to a player, you may howl?
I assume that there's other
kind of funny
things.
thing. Yeah, but it only ever turns on if you have fulfilled this condition of attacking, but then it is an action word on top of that.
Yeah, but like in context, if you have created 2 wolves throughout the like fullness of the game, and you have any sort of triggered ability that can howl, that is independent of combat or that you can consistently enable, then you can like chump attack with those wolves continually. You can essentially like the turn, in the new Innistrad set limited, the turn where you like swing in with a bunch of zombies and your opponent has to block some stuff, and they don't want to block the zombies because they're disposable, but they are like representing 4 damage continually. This is like that, but like over and over again. And worse, if you actually have 3, then you start to like create this like assemble the legion sort of thing.
Yeah, Midnight Hunt, obviously, like there were so many different ways to create zombies, and if there was a situation where your opponent had the choice to like prevent a zombie from being created or not, usually it wasn't horrible if it happened, because if you attacked the zombie was dead, and then if they get a zombie, they can't block with it. So I totally agree with you. I'm not sure if maybe it's better if they were 1/1s, or see, that probably feels a little bit too weak. Or if like Juliet was saying, if it was more of like a deals damage. Although I do like the idea of, kind of being an attack trigger. The only other thing would be maybe it's a little hard to get going, and part of me kind of wants the Moon Brancher to be an equal power toughness. Like it just seems like a little strange that that it itself isn't.
So it only cares about equal power. So it's like this thing and another 2-power creature attacking.
The 2 equals 2 on another creature.
I misread that. It was power and okay, I totally misread that. So really, it's with the same power. Okay, so this would work just fine. Okay.
Also, this was designed by Feline. Feline got really fun cards. Make sure you do your artist credit on your silver bordered submissions. And Mark, do you have a final card?
Let's see here.
Did you submit any cards for Howl?
I did submit cards for Howl, but I think I'd rather actually talk about another person's card, because I feel like they did the concept that I was trying to do in a way that I thought was better, even if it's a little bit more, I guess, parasitic. I can find it in the thing. The one that I would like to talk about is Coldhollow Alpha in the MSE file. It's 2/2 for 2 and a green with Howl. Coldhollow Alpha gets +2/+2 until end of turn. As you attack, choose one howl of an attacking creature you control. Trigger that ability for each attacker with a howl. So I don't think this is precisely a triggered ability as it's written. It's currently like a replacement effect that changes. Actually, hold on.
It's a trigger as you attack.
No, as you do a thing, is a replacement effect that changes what happens.
Okay. Well, I trust other people to know the rules, and I'm sure Cajun could fix this to be something else. But it looks like a trigger to me. It also maybe trigger that ability means even though it's typically a replacement effect, in this case it becomes a triggered ability.
It's possible, yeah. And it's also like one of those things where like the difference between a triggered ability and a replacement effect for stuff like this is pretty marginal. The only times it would super matter would be if you had something that was like fundamentally defensive but even then for combat, it's not necessarily the same. Like usually you see replacement effects around changing how something enters the battlefield. That way, like a meddling mage can't get lightning bolted before being able to name lightning bolt, for example.
Or a 0/0 clone doesn't die when it enters the battlefield.
Exactly. And so, but I like the idea of like, there's these howl abilities and you're adding modality onto everything by having it be able to grant the howl abilities to other stuff. And you're creating like a team that all gets some sort of benefit. So like at its best, this is like trumpet blasting your entire team whenever it swings in, which is like really good. It's like as though you battle cried with a couple creatures, which is amazing. And then it also probably does something where like if you have a howl that gives +1/+1 counters or a howl that gives flying or stuff like that, then in context it becomes this like, I'm going to build this very synergistic team that works well together. I'm like slightly sad that it doesn't in any way work with other triggered abilities of other creatures, or it doesn't like have any way to grant stuff. Because like Howling, I don't know what it is, but conceptually to me, Howling has this idea of like some sort of activated or triggered ability that like spreads out among the creatures you control, and they all participate in the howl, which this captures really well, but is kind of in a way that is a little parasitic and a little bit linear. But I think I think it's really sharp.
My review of this is like almost 5 stars. This is like I think a really great replacement for trying to do a soul bond style flavor. I think you could just take Absent Restored and replace soul bond with Howl triggers, maybe a different name. But of course Howl is really flavorful as presented here. And the fun thing about the like quote unquote free trumpet blast every turn is you're electing not to use the text that's on the other cards. So they're kind of giving up their ability in order to get the +2/+0, and you can't like mix and match. You choose one each combat.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's free in the sense that like you don't have to pay any mana for the ability, but the rate is priced in. So like for this one, like the difference between a 2/2 and a 4/2 for 3 is roughly 1 point of mana, but then presumably your other howl abilities are also like a point of mana difference between things. And so you have this like opportunity cost decision where it's like, okay, what's the best ability contextually on the table here? it might be a little bit frustrating in situations where there's like one like card that is far and away above others in terms of rate. So you'd have to be pretty precise around like making sure that things are not just like on their face mana wise the same sort of rate, but also that in the context of the limited environment, no one Howl was like a glaringly obvious choice in a lot of use cases. So it'd be something you'd have to test pretty extensively, just to make sure that you didn't end up like Xeroxing, some random like black uncommon. Anybody who could get that would just howl that thing continually, for example. But I like the idea of your creatures become modal over time, but they become modal for the whole squad.
I always like scenarios where you have to make a choice and there's not always an obvious choice to make. So when it's do I activate the Trumpet Blast ability? Do I give all my wolves Death Touch, or do my all my wolves have vigilance or something like that? So I think it's kind of fun being able to, you have to choose one. and if it was like they all got everything, then it just kind of snowballs and it becomes a lot less interesting. And I do like that it is an attack trigger instead of just like a combat trigger. Like if it would be a lot of thinking involved if the person attacking you kind of all had to decide like what are they going to choose, like which ones do I attack. So obviously a lot cleaner, a lot easier if it's your attack trigger, because then your opponent gets to they get to react once you've chosen how you're howling.
I totally agree.
There's an extra knob here that I just noticed that's actually really nice, which is because you have to attack with the howling creature, you can constrain good howl abilities by putting them on things with 1 or 2 points of toughness. Where by contrast, if we say this is like an only okay howling ability, which I don't know, that's probably something to determine through playtesting, you could put this on like a 2/4 for 4, for example.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. I can imagine a 1/4 howl, basically no ability, but it is a howl ability, and just being able to constantly get an extra proc on whatever your best howl is at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that will about do it for the day.
Yeah. All right. So thank everybody for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you would like to participate in Moxtober, you can participate by using the MTG Moxtober hashtag on Twitter. You can participate by joining the Beacon of Creation Discord, by submitting to either mtg.design or to the r/custom magic subreddit. And please credit artists if you'd like to have your submissions considered for coming podcasts. Also, we only compile from mtg.design and various discords, including the Custom Magic Beacon of Creation discords. You can, on any of the discords where we do accept submissions, there will be instructions on how to submit in their MTG Moxtober sub-discord. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow for another one. Have a great day.